Namaste. One of the problems of life, and it's treated in the Gita also, is what is Dharma? What is right? How can you know whether what you are doing is right or not? Many times you find yourself, you don't have somebody who's wiser than you to counsel you, and you have to make sometimes split-second decisions. It's not so easy. But there are certain keys that can help you to do the right thing. First of all, will it make you happy? This is very important because morality is not that which the government tells you should do, which society tells you should do, which religion tells you what you do, or your parents or anybody else. It's right inwardly. That which is right for one person may not be right for another. For example, supposing Mahatma Gandhi, who had spent his life serving others, were to wake up one morning and to declare, I'm tired of serving people, I want to go out and become a millionaire. Wouldn't everybody, even materialists, say he had fallen? But supposing that a very lazy fellow one day gets up off his bed of rest and says, I'm going to go out and become a millionaire. Wouldn't even saints say he had done a good thing? You see, morality is relative. It depends on the situation. It depends on the person. We're climbing a ladder, and at any place where you are on the ladder, that which is below you is not right. That which is above you is right. And so there are certain criteria that you can use, and one of them, as I suggested, is your inner happiness. Ask yourself, will this make me happy? Gandhi certainly would not be happy. That lazy fellow would somehow feel happy. He'd sort of pat himself on the back. I'm doing something good for a change. You will notice that I remember many years ago I wrote somebody a very stinging letter. And it was something he needed, I thought. But there was a certain restless feeling in my heart, and I didn't send the letter. I think it would have been perhaps a mistake. Perhaps he wasn't ready to hear those things. But listen to that voice. Listen to your heart. Is it restless? Does it have a feeling of a stamp of approval? You'll find that in those cases you will usually, and perhaps in time, always be right. I know that my parents lived in Atherton, in south of San Francisco, and there was a metaphysical bookstore. When I visited my parents, I would go to the bookstore. And the lady who owned the bookstore one time, she said, would you like to have this shop? Would you like to buy it from me? And I was thinking of a business for Ananda community, and I didn't know she was serious, so I didn't think about it. But I came in a few months later, and she says, would you like to buy it? Would you like to buy this shop? Well, the second time she asked me, I decided she might be sincere. So I said, do you really mean it? She said, yes, I'm getting old. It's time I turned this over to somebody else, and I want someone who would honor my traditions of spiritual books. So I just paused for a moment and asked my guru and consulted my heart, and I said, yes. Well, there was a lot beyond that yes that had to happen. I needed about $45,000 as a down payment. I had no money. But somebody gave me, we had 2 weeks to finish the deal. Somebody gave us, Ananda, 37,000. Other people handed money in. We had the money we needed, and it has become one of the best-known metaphysical bookstores in America. Well, when you follow your inner guidance, you will be told what to do. But the inner guidance requires also that stamp of approval. And one of them was the feeling of, yes, this is a wonderful thing to do. It's a service. That which makes you happy. And there is another criterion, and that is inner freedom. Both of these things are talked about in the Gita. We must do those things which will lead to inner freedom. That is to say, all desires are binding, but certain actions help to free us from that bondage. We must understand that right action, dharmic action, is that which will take you out of bondage into freedom. And so that which is a good thing for some people might be bad for you. For me to have become a businessman and an ordinary person, what my father wanted me to be, would have been a disaster, because I would have felt trapped. It wasn't what my soul wanted. Giving up everything and seeking God was right for me. You have to feel that criterion of intuition, that stamp of approval, which comes from the feeling, and this is how you can know, is this a right act or is it not? Is there freedom in it? I can imagine many people facing the choice of life that Gandhi faced, rejecting it because they would feel bound by it. But with him, there was soul liberation. So these two criteria are very important. And you will find that when your intuition, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, I know my father went by reason, my mother went much more by intuition. And I remember she said to my father one time, I know you're always saying that my predictions are after the fact. She said, today I'm telling you that today we will get a very important letter. And that letter came that day. Well, of course my father didn't believe her. You can't convince skeptics in these ways, but it's a very important point. Follow that intuition. And how will you know that it's intuition? Not by emotion, and that's where it can become troublesome. You bet on a horse. I don't believe in betting, but some people do, so let them bet on a horse. And they naturally want that horse to win, so they say, yes, yes, go, go, go. But that's not their feelings, they're confusing them. It may come in last in a line of 12. The important thing is, do you feel in your heart that it is right? Those ladies I talked about in Mexico, when they bet on the horse, they had that feeling that it was right. And perhaps also with that feeling they helped to make it right. This is all very subtle. I don't know the answer to it all. But I do know that when I have felt that I should do something, then I did it. I know that that many times in my life I have done things that were apparently absolutely screwy, but they worked. I remember one time, a perfectly practical situation, but we were debating whether to rent a house in San Francisco for our community, and we didn't have the money. We had no way of paying it, but I felt that we should do it. And there was somebody among my friends who was just shaking his head and saying, this is madness, this is madness. But I felt right about it, and it turned out to be just the right thing to do. So the inner freedom that I mean is that you feel a certain release of pressure. You feel a certain, there's nothing holding you down. You feel that somehow you've risen from something. I can't describe it very exactly, but these are all ways of knowing whether your intuition and your guidance are correct or not. So you might put it this way. If you feel God's smile in your heart, do it. If you feel his frown, don't do it. It's quite simple. Now, I have written a book called Do It Well, and it's just come out on the market, and I would like very much to read you a few things from it, because they too will prepare you for our discussion of the Bhagavad Gita. And then finally, we'll get into reading the Bhagavad Gita itself and going into all the passages of it. But this book is on the market, and I really recommend it. It's one of my own favorites, I might say. When an elder or a superior takes you to task, listen impersonally, but never tell yourself, considering the position that person holds, he must be right. People are simply human beings. Each carries faults and weaknesses that stick to him like burrs until he reaches enlightenment. Indeed, spiritual development, like the sunlight shining through a stained glass window, may actually highlight a person's flaws until further progress eliminates his ego altogether. Now, India is a country where people are very strongly traditional, and they feel that if their father did it, it's right. If their society does it, it's right. I would like you to have the independence of mind to feel in your own self, is it right? Sometimes it will not be right for you. You must stand up against the world. And just the fact that somebody has a position, this is what when I lived in a monastery, I had my superiors saying, don't you think you ought to listen? Well, maybe yes and maybe no. They weren't always right. And in fact, I found them disastrously wrong sometimes. There's another very curious thing that I have seen, that as people advance spiritually, sometimes their flaws become exaggerated. They may be more angry, more selfish, more judgmental. It seems strange you think spiritual people wouldn't be like that. But again, it's like the sunlight. When the sunlight is strong behind a stained glass window, it will highlight every little flaw in the window. And so as people develop spiritually, they develop power. And that power will highlight their character. And it's only after a time that they will begin to realize that this is not making me comfortable. I don't like this. But I know, for example, one woman who was, she was my superior, and she was absolutely dogmatic and absolutely sure of herself. And she could be disastrously wrong sometimes. I remember one time she was an astrologer, and she had predicted, on the basis of her astrology, which was obviously not right, that Disneyland would be a failure. Years after Disneyland had become one of the great successes in history, I reminded her of her statement that I had heard somebody quote from her. And she said, oh, yes, what a tragedy. All the money they poured into that place. She wasn't even able to see that Disneyland had not fulfilled her prophecy. It was a huge financial success. Well, these qualities, you just wonder, because this woman was highly advanced, actually. You just wonder, how could highly advanced people be that way? You will notice this when you go to spiritual people, that sometimes, unless they're already Jivan Muktas, if they've overcome the ego, there are no spots there, but until they've overcome ego, they may have specks on their spectrum, you might say. They may have things still to overcome. And the astonishing thing is that those things are sometimes much worse than ordinary worldly people. They're exaggerated. So don't listen to people just because of the position they hold. Always be guided also by that feeling inside yourself, is this right for me? They wanted me to do things that were fortunately not only what I didn't feel to do, I didn't feel it was right, but fortunately my guru also had told me what I should do. And so that was easier in my case. But many people in monasteries, out of obedience, they speak of it as holy obedience, they have done things that are absolutely foolish. Nuns have been told, novice nuns, to plant a plant upside down in the ground just to make sure that they are absolutely mindless in their obedience. What is obedience? When I met my guru, he offered me his unconditional love and asked me to give him my love, my unconditional love. Then he asked me for my unconditional obedience. And I said, sir, I did want to be sincere. I said, sir, what if I ever think you're wrong? And he answered, I will never ask anything of you that God himself doesn't ask me to ask. I said, then, sir, I give you my unconditional obedience. And that was a very wise thing that I did. To follow a guru unconditionally is a good thing because he knows what is right for you. Sometimes my guru told me things that to me seemed wrong for me, but I did them, and they always turned out to be right in the end. And one time I even challenged him, and he answered, living for God is martyrdom. Martyrdom of the ego, martyrdom of the self, martyrdom of desires, martyrdom of your own opinion even sometimes. But when other people, if other people ask you your obedience, don't obey somebody just because he has a higher position than you, unless the exigencies of the occasion, like your boss, demand it of you. But if your boss tells you to do something undharmic, then I would say don't do it. Find some tactful way around, not around doing it. Find some tactful way to say, well, show him the pros and cons, but say, sir, I don't think I'm capable of doing that. Find some way, but don't do anything adharmic just because your boss tells you. To obey somebody who is not wise can weaken your will. To obey somebody who has wisdom will strengthen your will. The most important thing you have as a soul, as an ego, as an individual in this world is your free will. And you must keep that will as a priceless treasure. The more you can go by what is right inwardly, the more you will find that everything you do will come out all right in the end. But don't obey anybody just because of his position. Obey the true Guru and obey the voice of God. You, as a child of God, must always remember that for you, right and wrong may be different. But right and wrong will be that which takes you up the ladder toward greater peace, greater happiness, greater inner joy. And that which is wrong for you will take you down the ladder toward greater bondage, greater suffering, greater oppression. Joy to you.